All right, I think we're ready to get started. So hello everyone and welcome to our webinar. You're listening to IXIASOFT episode 10, believe it or not, how to channel the knowledge of technical experts into perfectly crafted content. I'm Sydney Jones, your host and head of marketing communications here at IXIASOFT. IXIASOFT is a webinar series that covers data, agile document management, localization, IXIASOFT's very own CCMS, and more. Episodes are released periodically and cover a wide range of topics in the telecom industry. Before we get started, there are a few things you should know. First off, this webinar is being recorded. We'll send you a link to the recorded version about an hour or so after it airs, so you can share it with colleagues who weren't able to make it. We can't hear you either, so for those of you holding back a sneeze, don't worry, you're on mute. And finally, if you would like to ask a question during the webinar, please type this into the questions section of your control panel at any point during the presentation. We will answer all of these questions at the end during the Q&A session. So now onto the show. Our guests today are Philipp Baur from Congree and Keith Schengili-Roberts from IXIASOFT. Welcome to IXIASOFT. We're thrilled to have you both.
Hello.
Hey, Sydney. Hello.
So before we get into today's topic, I will let you introduce yourselves to the audience.
Hello, my name is Philip, and I don't look at all like on that picture. You should get that updated. A lot older now. I'm the product manager at Congree, and Congree is a software company located in the south of Germany, and I'm responsible there for the only software product we have, the Congree authoring server. And at the end of today's webinar, we will learn a little bit more about that. I spent the last 10 years of my professional career designing author assistant software, listening to customers' needs and ideas, and incorporating them into the software. And I also helped creating one of the most sophisticated author assistant tools on the market. And since I studied technical communication, I also bring some technical knowledge about translation, terminology, and technical documentation to the table. What about you, Keith? Who are you?
Oh, existential questions right off the bat. Yikes. Yeah, hello there. Hello, everybody. My name is Keith Schengili-Roberts. And as it says here, I'm the Senior Data Content Strategist at IXIASOFT. What that means that if you have a chance to read our very fine manuals, that's at least in part due to the efforts of the team that I look after and manage. I am also a member of the OASIS Data Technical Committee, which is currently pushing for the DITA 2.0 standard, very much a thing still being crafted. And I'm also a member of the Lightweight Data Subcommittee. That's something else I'd also recommend people checking out. It's a stripped down, more simplified version of DITA that's available in not just in XML format, but also for HTML5 and Markdown. So sort of opening up things to other areas, not just XML in terms of DITA. I'm also the chair of the OASIS Data Adoption Committee, where our efforts are basically trying to help people better understand DITA through our use of white papers and the occasional webinars, and also things like listening sessions where we take feedback from people in the community to understand how people are using DITA and what they would like to see it improved. The gray hairs you see in the picture of me, which believe me, I'm certainly a bit grayer than that picture, much like Philip. I have changed a little bit since then. Much of the gray hair is due to what I put down to my 14+ years of experience with DITA, but it comes with the hair may have turned gray, but hopefully the gray cells inside the same head are full of knowledge. Yes, which you'll see shortly. And speaking of which, I'm also a lecturer on information architecture at the iSchool at the University of Toronto, where I teach a master's level course on the subject, usually every summer. So call me professor if you want.
Thanks, Keith and Philip. So you know that people actually can't see you, right? So you can pretend that those pictures are what you look like now, just FYI.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, so before we jump in here, I'll just give you a quick overview of the agenda. So we'll be getting, well, we already did our introduction, so that's done. Then we'll get into why SMEs subject matter experts are being asked to contribute content, the challenges that SMEs face. Then we'll move into Philip's portion, which is working with a living style guide, followed by the demo, and we'll wrap it up with our Q&A period at the end. So Keith, I will let you take it away.
All right then. Okay, so basically, this section is going to be looking at, essentially why subject matter experts are being asked to contribute more and more content these days. And this is going to be at least at the beginning, kind of a historical approach to the subject. So I think it's worth pointing out, I don't know how many people here actually have delved into the history of their craft, but if you go back to the late 19th, early 20th century, you'll find that the manuals that were created, and what you see here are examples that I actually managed to lift from the Gutenberg project, at least in part that, and archive.org. And like you see here things on learning how to fly and Wright Brothers style airplane, or how to scientifically swim, and I love the one, how to behave on using a Republican etiquette. So I'll leave that to your thinking. But the point of all this is really just to say that in the beginning, technical documentation was very much a cottage industry. Manuals are typically created as one-off publications written by experts for other experts. And to be honest, if the user was lucky, they would have gone through an editing pass before the publication went out the door. And the earliest technical writers were, in fact, the subject matter experts. And it's worth pointing out that when it came to those who were teaching how to do technical writing, in other words, writing that was more focused on the reader and not necessarily assuming that they were an expert. The first ones were really English professors in the United States who had a lot of engineering students who had to clearly document things like their inventions. So, if you're familiar with Strunk of Strunk and White, that was essentially his role back in the 19-teens. And this was also in part an aim for better literacy amongst engineers. There was an understanding that engineers needed to communicate better, and they also needed to better understand and the increasingly non-engineering audiences that they were writing for. So then what we see is the rise of the technical writers, sort of coming online roughly around the time of the Second World War. And part of the reason for this change was the advent of consumer products and military equipment that was simply too complex to be understood at a glance. And you can see some examples from roughly the 1940s, displayed there. Like if you wanted to, for example, the Harley Davidson motorcycle manual that's there, that is basically on not just how to ride the motorbike, but how to completely disassemble and understand all of the issues that come with it. And in this case, you can't assume that the person writing this is, or rather the audience, is going to be at the same technical level. They simply can't be. So that was where the technical writers started to come in as a separate and distinct profession during, as I say here, during World War II. So this is when non-SME writers began to enter the mix. So now the current role of the technical writer, and this is, to be fair, kind of oversimplified, but bear with me. I think for the most part is still true. Often technical writers are there to essentially interview the subject matter experts, obtain independent information about a product, and then essentially write it down. They're also there to create additional supporting content, edit content that comes in from the SMEs, create things like style guides to guide essentially the other technical writers on the team, and also ensure that there is consistent messaging across different types of manuals, so that things come across using a single corporate look and feel, and tone of voice. So technical communication is also very much a formal discipline these days. I mean, there are college and university courses that train specifically for this profession. And coincidentally, this is also one that many subject matter experts have little or no direct experience with. So that now brings us to, why SMEs are increasingly being asked to contribute contents. And what I want to emphasize in this section is that things are changing for technical writers as well as for SMEs. So what you're seeing here, well, okay, bit of background. Since late 2012, I've been checking the details for technical writer job postings on Indeed.com, which is US's largest job post aggregator website. So over the past 7 years, there's been, as you can see here, an overall decline in the number of, and I want to sort of put this in quotes, technical writer. When I'm doing a search, I'm using, the term, searching specifically on the term technical writer, as you see here, job postings on the website. And there's now roughly 1,000 fewer job postings across the states than from its peak in the fall of 2015. And part of the reason for that is what you see here is that the role of the technical writer appears to be changing. And by the way, again, I want to emphasize, by technical writer I mean job titles that did not have technical writer or writer in them. So what's evident to me is that there is so in the survey I did of roughly 1,500 LinkedIn profiles where people claim to be currently using DITA, 2/3 were not employed as traditional technical writers. And some of the selected job titles that basically are what you see here, just sort of a scattering of things, everything from, say, applications engineer to, hey, content strategist, that sounds very familiar to me, DITA architect, information architect, lead information developer, senior content developer, senior content strategist, user assistant, development architect, all of these things that you see here. And keep in mind that many of these, what I find is the 3 main positions associated with DITA job titles that are not, strictly speaking, technical writers. There are managers, then there are those who assist with the publication process, and those who are structuring content or providing some additional value to the output process. And that's really what I think is going on here, is that people who, these particular people are providing their value add less in terms of directly writing the content, but structuring it and also finding better ways of delivering it to their user base. So as I say, essentially technical writers being technical communicators, let's make it the broader term, are being asked to provide more value add. So as I say, they're being asked to provide more structure to content. And from the high level, we're talking about maps, like they have to create data maps that may have sort of providing a structure for content, which is then filled in at the lower level, topics perhaps using templates that are then assigned to either other writers or, more often than not, subject matter experts, with asking them to essentially, please tell us about your about this particular topic, given the title, put all the information you know about it here. They also do things like oversee content management and distribution, also help with developing specific content tools for their organization, devising style guides, and ensuring consistent messaging, among many other things. So again, I just want to point out that I believe that technical communicators are in the middle of a fairly significant industry change. So again, this is detailing information from Indeed.com, looking at the various rates at which technical writer job postings are asking for these additional skills. In this case, DITA, FrameMaker, and XML. So since the beginning of my long career in technical writing, which is a quarter century, FrameMaker has long been considered the tool of choice by professionals. But the fact is that XML skills are more in demand and have been for several years. And as you can see by this table of job postings, XML, in other words, structured content, is mentioned in job postings far more often than the venerable FrameMaker tool. And it appears as though we will soon see DITA eclipsing the tool if the trend we see here continues. And it's also perhaps worth pointing out that there's been some growth in DITA tech writer jobs over the years. That growth has been slow and is currently about perhaps 4% of all technical writer job posts. But keep in mind what I was saying earlier, that technical writer no longer being the job title of choice when it comes to DITA related job roles. So there's typically what I'm finding about like what the numbers you see here are in the, like perhaps the low hundreds. But if I just do a search on, DITA without trying to tie things down to technical writing specifically, I typically get anywhere between a quarter to twice as much types of jobs that are coming up. So this is really just saying that yes, things are changing. The other key thing is that SMEs are also being asked to produce more upstream content. This is another critical piece of the puzzle. So when it comes to API documentations, there's long been an expectation that programmers are expected to provide much of that content. This is then often framed and put into context by the technical writing team. Also, the advent of agile doc processes in small software development teams also means that in many circumstances, the SMEs also had to write the content. So the demand and pace of agile is forcing more information to come from upstream. This is easier thanks to workflows within CCMSs, such as the IXIASOFT system. Technical writers still have a role, but in this case, it's more editorial in nature. But let's face it, few SMEs want to learn DITA. Ultimately, though, it's worth keeping in mind that it's best for the technical writers and for the company if the content can be authored in DITA from the start. Fortunately, they do not have to if they are using the IXIASOFT CCMS web, as it is basically there to hide any DITA complexity. But there are additional challenges that SMEs have to face. So what are those challenges? Well, content needs to be reusable. This is one of the chief advantages of DITA. And basically this means that SMEs have to be able to find the content that they can reuse. And they also have to be able to write the content with reuse in mind. And part of the reasons for why we want to be able to have reusable content is that, it's sort of a key cornerstone of it's a DITA fundamental. It's more efficient. There's things like reduced localization costs. Things are more consistent. And this has been a real development focus in the portion of the UI of the IXIASOFT CCMS web that is aimed specifically at SMEs. The content also has to be translation ready. Now, this is a similar argument as that for reuse, but with some additional constraints. That means that the content has to be concise and consistent, and content must meet readability level requirements. And this is one of the reasons for emphasizing the practice of minimalism when writing with DITA. Most technical writers working with DITA know about this, but again, we're not talking about technical writers, but SMEs, who may well think that, hey, more material is always better, when in fact, the content really needs to be short and concise while also telling the user what they need to know. Readability level requirements are also important, even with English material, because you can't always assume that your audience is made of native English speakers. Aiming at a reasonable readability grade level, and if you're not sure what this is, look up the Fleisch Reading Ease metric for more information, is really what is recommended by standard IA information architecture practice. The other thing is content has to fit the brand messaging. This includes the following considerations, such as you see here: terminology use, tone of voice, it should be linguistically flawless, it should be on brand, and content should not only instruct, but also help build the relationship with the structure. And again, this is something that's pretty much ingrained for technical writers. Not only do they usually have ready access to any branding material that their marketing department has, but they also have, hopefully most teams have created their own style guide, capturing many of the points covered here. But again, SMEs often do not know how or where to access this material, which is another major reason why subject matter expert created content needs to be processed by technical writers prior to publication. So at this point, I'm going to hand things over to Philip, who's now going to talk about how you can work with a living style guide.
Thank you, Keith. So that SMEs can really tackle the challenge, we should help them as much as possible in terms of writing rules and wording. This is what Keith already mentioned. And what we see, what we have to keep in mind, and what Keith already told us as well, is that we have to assist SMEs as much as possible with content creation rules. So what you would normally do or already have done is that you will maintain a style guide. So we have some way to define and make sure how content is created. So we want to define how we want to sound. So what emotions do we want to evoke? So are we more looking for trust or for happiness? Are we looking for security? Do we want to sound elitist or more accessible, and so on and so on? Also, we want to define what's wrong and what's right. So what spelling and grammar rules do we want to follow? Are we writing in US English or UK English? Do we want to consider stuff like the Oxford comma, or also basic decisions on how long should a sentence be, and so on? Also, we want to define rules for content reusability. So as Keith told us before, in DITA, we also have to take care that our content is reusable. And this is something where we have to consider topics like cohesion, coherence, and consistency. So cohesion being the glue, how you connect different sentences, and this glue has to be reusable. So if I have, for example, a sentence like "I like my cat," I can glue the sentence very well with another sentence, which is "My cat would kill me if she could." Those two sentences go together and they form a meaning, and you know that they are connected. But if you have a sentence like the following one, "But she would kill me if she could," you start the sentence with the wrong glue. So you start with "but" and you use "she." So if the sentence is independent of what you are currently told, then the sentence is not reusable because it starts in a way that it cannot be connected with anything else. Similar problems occur with coherence. Here we are talking about the idea on how we write content, so that we don't have contradictions, that we don't contradict each other. So if you go back to the cat, if I say that my cat is not for sale, and in the next sentence I say, contact me if you want to buy my cat, those two sentences don't go together because they contradict each other. And also, and this is maybe the most important part, we have to take care about consistency. And in consistency, we have to differentiate between language, style, and content consistency. Content being, once again, how I write, avoiding spelling mistakes, avoiding grammar mistakes. Style being how I address the user, so how do I talk, that this is consistent throughout the entire documentation, which is most likely not only written by me, but also by other people. So how can I ensure that SMEs that are not used to writing follow a certain style so that it all sounds like a single person has written all of that? And also we have the content consistency, which focuses heavily on always using exactly the same sentence when explaining the same idea. So if you're telling your customer how to open a hatch, you would always want to do that with the same words and not use different words every time. So if you have, for example, something like the instruction, feed the cat, and in the next sentence I have the instruction, you should feed the cat now, you're actually telling the same idea, but you're using different approaches, different styles, different wording, and this is something which of course you should avoid, and you can avoid using your style guide, which defines how you should actually write. Also, we have to take care about the terminology. So we have a terminology database which defines words to use and words not to use. So one classic example is if you have a screwdriver, do you call it the Philip screwdriver or do you call it the crosshead screwdriver? driver or anything else. I mean, it's all correct, but you have to take care that you always use the same words. And this is what terminology helps you. So the terminology tells you, in our company, we call this a crosshead screwdriver, not the Phillips screwdriver. And this way, we cannot confuse our users, our end users. The same with the meaning. So we want to define a unique meaning for every technical name. So if I say, for example, the screwdriver is a tool, and in the next sentence I tell my user not to be a tool, then I have two complete different meanings for tool, and this is something that cannot happen. So you always have to use certain words with a specific meaning and should avoid ambiguity here. Okay, so that's our rules. This is what we have to set up to help our SMEs. But now we have, of course, the problem that we have to get SMEs to actually follow those guidelines. As Keith told us before, we have the problem that SMEs don't want to dig deep into data, and we have the same issue with our guidelines. So few SMEs want to learn those rules by heart. So we spend a lot of time, and it was not easy to create those rules and to maintain them and to keep them up to date. But it's even harder to get people to actually learn them and use them all the time. Few SMEs want to invest time in terminology research. So this is also something which is very obvious. I mean, I'm the SME, I'm the expert, I know what I'm talking about, and I have always talked about that with my words. So I used my own terminology. So I wouldn't even get the idea that this might be wrong in the company I'm currently working in. So I don't check in the terminology database how I should actually name that. The information would be there, but I don't access it. And few SMEs want to find out about changes to rules and word use manually. This is also a big problem because it changes all the time. So you have new product, new technology, new laws, and your guidelines will change. So you will have new style rules, you will have changed style rules, you will have new terminology, some old terminology disappears, maybe a word you were allowed to use in the past is now forbidden. And how can you ensure that your SMEs actually access this information and stay up to date? So this is something which is really complicated, and this is why Congree exists. So Congree is a plugin which is available for IXIASOFT CCMS Web. And this plugin actually knows your entire style guide. So you have your style guide in maybe written form, maybe in PDF, maybe in some wiki, maybe in Confluence, and all rules are written down. You spend a lot of time to do that. And Congree is actually capable of being fed those rules and returning those rules to the user while content is being created. And the same goes for terminology. So Congree knows your entire terminology. So you have a term database where you build up all your words and all your meanings and all your forbidden words, and Congree can access that, take this over, and really in real time tell the user why content is being created that something is wrong. So that you either violate some writing rule, anything else in the style guide, or that you have some wrong word use or some unclear word use, and this is something the system tells you right away.
So Philip, are you ready for the demo portion?
Yeah, so let's switch to my demo environment. While you set this up, maybe it's worth mentioning that what you're going to see now is pretty new. So it's you're getting basically a sneak peek of what's going to come. We see the integration into the IXIASOFT CCMS environment as it is right now. So it's still in development, and maybe Sydney, you could tell us a little bit more about the future of all that.
Right, so this should be available publicly on our website within the next few months. So just keep your eyes peeled for an email. I'll be sending out a notification to everybody on our mailing list to let them know when this is ready and available on our website. So that should be by the end of the year 2019. We'll keep you posted.
All right, and what I did here now is I connected to IXIASOFT CCMS. I have a virtual machine for that, which was provided by IXIASOFT. This is an extremely intuitive tool, by the way. So we have just received this this environment where we could play. No one told us how it works, and yeah, it was really very easy to work with that. And what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to open this demo document I prepared. This is actually not a single topic. It's a few topics which I glued together so that I will be able to show you a little bit more. And I'm just going ahead and will edit this. And what you can see here now is my topics. Now I can edit it, and there is a tab which you can click, which is responsible for Congree. So here you can see the Congree integration directly into this CCMS interface. And since I didn't click anything in my document yet, I don't get any feedback. So nothing is wrong so far. But as soon as I start clicking content, for example, this paragraph, I already get some feedback for this paragraph. So apparently in this one paragraph I clicked, Congree already found some issues contradicting the style guide and the terminology we have in the background. So for example, I get this information. I'm informed that I should check for ambiguous structures and unclear relations. This is very general, but then I get also some detailed instruction on what I should do next, just like in your style guide. So this is really a living style guide which connects to your documents and always tells you if you contradict against the style guide. So, and here I get the instruction: avoid more than one noun modifier with off. Rephrase the sentence if possible. And then I also get some information why. It might be unclear what is modified by the second off phrase. Okay, so this is just one of the rules which exists and which I decided to activate for this demonstration. There are a lot of rules which you can select. So you normally will be able to cover most of your style guide using the onboard stuff inside of Congree. Of course, you might have some additional rules which do not yet exist in the system, but they can easily be added by our experts into the system so that the system also knows about your specific rules. And you also always have an example which gives you an idea how it is done incorrectly and how it could be done correctly. And with that information at hand, I can actually do some improvement to my document. So what I'm going to do here now is just to simplify this. I will just write the result improves, improves the comprehensibility of technical documentation and unprecedented level. So I did this now, and now you can see that my score went up. So now none of the text I touched is broken, and I get the information that I'm following my style guide to the full, and that there are no terminology issues inside. So of course, this doesn't only work for content which has already been created and which I have just clicked. It also works for content which I'm currently writing. So let's try that as well. So I'm going to write a completely unrelated sentence. So I wrote the sentence, and as you can see, I instantly get some feedback about that sentence as well. I've just written it, and I get the information, okay, so punctuation is a problem, so I should not use exclamation points, I should use periods. I'm not saying this is a general rule which everyone should use and which is applicable everywhere, but it is here. So for this company, this is important. So what I'm doing here, I'm just fixing this issue. Also, I shouldn't use it like this. I'm writing it is instead. And also I shouldn't start my sentence with this. This is what I mentioned before. This is not very cohesive because you cannot reuse the sentence everywhere. So what I can do here is instead of that, I can write maybe the video if you're talking about a video. So the video also explains why it is so easy to use. Now, once again, I've created a sentence which where no issues remain. And this way I just go on and yeah, modify my document. And whenever I write something, I get the feedback if something is wrong or not. Of course, I can do this for the entire topic, or even for all topics which I have currently available. So I do this here. I can click here, and then Congree will go through the entire topic and show me all violations I have regarding my style guide and regarding my terminology, and they will be listed here. And here I can even go ahead and focus on a certain group of problems. So here, for example, this is not really a problem. Here I get some feedback that I used correct terminology, so that's fine. I'm happy about that. But of course, I can hide this if this information is not relevant for me. And I can go into more critical topics like terminology. So here, apparently, I have a lot of issues. You can see this because I have 9 issues and they are marked red, which means that this highly influences the quality of my document. So it means that I have to do a lot to improve my document. I have to fix a lot of terminology issues to actually have a document which has an acceptable level of terminology use. Let's have a look at some of the more critical problems. So here, for example, I wrote headset, I wrote headphone. And actually for this company, headphone is a forbidden term and it should always be headset. So what I can do here, I can click it, it's added to the document and fixed. And then I can go to the next one. Here I used the product name, Content Grasp SX, but what I didn't do is also add the company name. So, and my company requires me to always add the company name when I'm talking about the product. So I'm informed here that I should do that. And once again, I can just click it and it's added to the document. And I can also see that I made the same mistake about this, this company at the beginning of the product name 5 times. So I can actually click this, see what locations are affected, and just decide to fix them all, clicking this button, and they will all be fixed in the document. So it's a very fast way to solve some general problems that might occur in an already written down topic. What is also always important to remember is that this is stateless. So whatever I do, I can always go on where I left off. So I now left the editing modus. I can go back, and Congree is ready again, and I can just start the document check again and go on where I left off the last time. So this is always possible. So I can return to my terminology. I have 2 remaining issues. One is this one, where I used upgrade. This is now one of those cases where the system has to ask if I use upgrade in the correct context. So it tells me, check whether in this context the corresponding term is preferred or has a preferred variant. And this is a deprecated term, and it's also a preferred or omitted term in some other context. And now as an SME or as an author, I have to decide if upgrade or improvement is correct. And here, the terminology we have in the background, something which is already there and you already have, I can really help. So I can have a look at the terminology, which we directly access via Congree to make this available for the user, so you don't have to do this manually. And we look up upgrade automatically, and I can see that upgrade is the correct use if this definition is true. So the replacement of a product with a more advanced version of the same product. Improvement has a different definition. And if I wasn't already sure that upgrade is the correct one because this definition fits, I could have a look at the definition for improvement. But here I'm now clear that I have used the correct meaning of that word and that this word is correct here. So I can go ahead and ignore this, this message here because everything I did was okay. And here I have another case where I used some term which is actually allowed, but it's not the preferred variant. And so I'm hinted at that by the system, and I can decide if I really want to use a device or if I don't want to use instrument instead, which is the preferred variant. But in that case, I don't agree, so I don't do that, I just ignore it. And you see now that I've fixed all those terminology issues, the quality level already improved a bit. So it's still considered unsafe by the system, but I already have a score of 83, which is not so bad. So probably I don't have to do much more fixes to get at a more secure level. We can have a look at some additional issues which we have here. So for example, here we used an abbreviation which is not correct. Actually, this abbreviation should not be there at all, so I will just remove it. which fixes this issue. Here we have another topic. According to the company style guide, I shouldn't use future tense so much. So you should avoid future tense as much as possible. The reason being that future tense is not appropriate for technical documentation, according to this company once again. And once again, I can have a look at the example. By the way, all those texts, they are changed to fit your style guide. So they are really changeable by yourself. You don't need us for that. So you can completely edit the text which is displayed here. And then I can once again react to that. I'm too lazy for that, so I'm just going to skip it. Here I have a problem I also don't agree to, which happens more than once in documents. So what I will do here, I'm going to click ignore all so that all those issues disappear. And yeah, let's do this a little bit more for some more issues. And now you can see I've already reached an acceptable quality level here in my documentation according to the style guide and according to the setup of the style guide. And the more I correct, the better this is going to get. And this is something which can help me as a SME a lot to focus on my technical expertise and not take care so much about my style guide, my terminology, and whatever the company requires of me in the sense of language and language use. Okay, and with that, I think we can head back.
Okay, so thank you very much, Philip. We'd now like to move into the questions section. So we'll wrap up with a few questions here. Just a reminder again that if you have any, you can ask them by typing it into the control panel on the upper left-hand corner of your screen. So we'll read off the questions here. Our first question is, do you think that adding Congree to the IXIASOFT CCMS is sufficient for SMEs? Don't you think they still need technical writers to at least edit their content?
Okay, I mean, it's a little bit like what Keith mentioned at the beginning. So, but before I answer, I should maybe mention that most of our users, most of the Congree users are in fact technical writers. So that's where we are actually coming from that world. We have specific rules tailored for professional writers with a professional writing background. And Congree does not intend for you to change how you create content. This is a natural process in which you are and where you have to take your own decisions. Congree does not replace any human beings either. So Congree cannot create high quality content on its own. Congree is nothing more than, let's say, a helping hand showing you how to follow the writing rules set up by your company. And Congree makes the lives of SMEs easier because they can focus on their stuff and rely on others, making sure that the content is written down in an acceptable way. So Congree thus increases text creation speed, proofreading, and time to market in general, and you will be able to create more content in the same amount of time with the same amount of people. And, but it does not mean, that you can replace the technical writer. That doesn't work. So I mean, Keith told us before that the technical writers are there to be text creation experts, and they will always be that. So you're normally involved in the style guide maintenance, terminology maintenance, topic maintenance, involved in the publication process, available for proofreading. So it's actually a very close win-win like scenario where everyone does what he knows best or what they know best, and SMEs make their knowledge shareable, and technical writers ensure that that this is actually shared in the right form.
Okay, so our next question is the plugin also available for the CMS desktop client? The way it's described, it seems it would be useful as a tool not just for the SMEs but also for the writers.
Okay, since IXIASOFT is using the Oxygen editor and this editor is supported by Congree, yes, it's also available in a desktop version, or will be available once we are ready with that. And about the second part of the question, as I mentioned before, a large percentage of our users are actually technical writers. So yes, this is very useful for technical writers as well.
Okay, and our next question is, what level of investment in time is required to set up a style guide and terminology database?
This largely depends on how much you want to achieve. I mean, what many of our customers do, if they don't have a clear idea in what direction to go, they use a style guide which already exists. So there are best practices style guides we can provide. There's the STE style guide. So if you want to write close or completely in STE, so there are a lot of existing style guides which you can use where the effort is basically non-existent. So you would start with what's there, and from that you would evolve and see what really works for you and what doesn't work for you. Of course, if you already have an idea where you want to head and what your goal is, you would build up your style guide from scratch. Then more time is to be invested. This really depends on what you would like to achieve. Regarding terminology, this is something where you have to spend time to build up your terminology database. So this doesn't come from nothing. What Congree offers is a possibility to already collect term candidates, so words that might be relevant for terminology while you write. So this is something we didn't see today. It's not the focus for today, but this is something which exists. And of course, there's a lot of experts out there that can help you with the build-up of the terminology database.
Okay, and our next question here is, can Congree be added on the Oxygen editor interface for writers to use as a quality check?
Yes, for Oxygen, this plugin is already available and works out of the box. So if you have Oxygen, you can install Congree and you will have the same functionality which we saw today in the IXIASOFT CCMS.
Okay, the next question is, how do you customize the style guide / rules for a company? Can we do this ourselves?
You can do the customization by yourself, so you get the entire corpus of rules which we have, which is hundreds of rules from which you can choose from. Also, for several rules, there are modifications you can do yourself. For example, for sentence length and similar style rules where you do the configuration by yourself. The only exception is if you have rules that do not exist at all. So if you have some specific company rules, for example, that in your company, whenever you say the company name, you will also want to say best quality in the same sentence. And this is, of course, something you would have to create because it doesn't exist. And this is something you would have to order from Congree.
Okay, and that's it for our questions. So thank you everyone for tuning in to IXIA Talks episode 10. And thank you very much to our guests, again, Keith and Philip, for joining us and for sharing your expertise.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So our next webinar will be on Thursday, December 5th at the usual time of 11 a.m. And we'll be sending out that invite email a couple of weeks before the webinar. That will be with our partner Zoomin, and the title is Using Metadata to Deliver the Dynamic Content Users Want. So if you'd like to be featured in one of our webinars or you have a unique topic idea, please get in touch at team.ccms@ixiasoft.com. We'll see you soon.